Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're back with some Dear Esther. This will be the Landmark edition with a little bit of extra commentary and slightly updated graphics. This is another game I'd like to show off the soundtrack for because I find it to be beautifully haunting. Everything about this game is rather haunting, as I'm sure you'll see. I just want to kind of get right into this one. I'll do my best not to talk over the monologues because honestly, the writing in this game is some of the best out there.
Dear Esther, the morning after I was washed ashore, salt in my ears, sand in my mouth, and the waves always at my ankles, I felt as though everything had conspired to this one last shipwreck. I remembered nothing but water, stones in my belly and my shoes, threatening to drag me under to where only the most listless of creatures swim.
Donnelly reported the legend of the hermit, a holy man who sought solitude in its most pure form. Allegedly, he rode here from the mainland in a boat without a bottom, so all the creatures of the sea could rise at night to converse with him. How disappointed he must have been with their chatter. Perhaps now, when all that haunts the ocean is the rubbish dumped from the tankers, he'd find more peace. They say he threw his arms wide in a valley on the south side, and the cliff opened up to provide him shelter. They say he died of fever 116 years later. The shepherds left gifts for him at the mouth of the cave, but Donnelly records they never claimed to have seen him. I have visited the cave and I have left my gifts, but like them, I appear to be an unworthy subject of his solitude.
So for the vast majority of this game, we're just going to be following a red light.
Those islands in the distance, I am sure, are nothing more than relics of another time, sleeping giants, somnambulist gods laid down for a final dreaming. I wash the sand from my lips and grip my wrist ever more tightly. My shaking arms will not support my fading diaries.
Now this game does something really interesting where you might not get the exact same text in the same parts of the story on every playthrough. It switches things up just slightly, I believe.
I have found the ship's manifest, crumpled and waterlogged under a stash of paint cans. It tells me that along with this present cargo, there was a large quantity of antacid yogurt bound for the European market. It must have washed out to sea. God knows there are no longer gulls or goats here to eat it.
It does make the game's story hard to completely pick up just on one playthrough. I don't really feel like describing it all to you. Most of the games I play on this channel, I would highly recommend, even if you watch me play it, that you play them for yourself as well. Things like this, or Abzu, or some of the other things I want to play. are meant to be experienced on your own, I find. But I'll still do my best in Dear Esther to kind of talk about some of the themes, or at least my interpretation of what it is this story's trying to evoke. Just love lighthouses. Aesthetically, they're one of my favorite things in the whole darn world. I'm fortunate enough to live on the coast of where I live.
Reading Donnelly by the weak afternoon sunlight. He landed on the south side of the island, followed the path to the bay and climbed the mount. He did not find the caves, and he did not chart the north side. I think this is why his understanding of the island is flawed, incomplete. He stood on the mount and only wondered momentarily how to descend. But then, he didn't have my reasons. When someone had died or was dying, or was so ill they gave up what little hope they could sacrifice, they cut parallel lines into the cliff, exposing the white chalk beneath. You could see them from the mainland or the fishing boats, and know to send aid or impose a cordon of protection, and wait a generation until whatever pestilence stalked the cliff paths died along with its hosts. My lines are just for this, to keep any would-be rescuers at bay. The infection is not simply of the flesh.
So there's going to be a few stories told in our
They were God-fearing people,
hour or so
those
on the island.
shepherds. There was no love in the relationship. Donnelly tells me that they had one Bible that was passed around in strict rotation. It was stolen by a visiting monk in 1776, 2 years before the island was abandoned altogether. In the interim, I wonder, did they assign chapter and verse to the stones and grasses, marking the geography with a superimposed significance that they could actually walk the Bible and inhabit its contradictions?
So a lot of what's been spoken about so far is the story of Donnelly, somebody who lived on this island
Dear Esther,
before I discovered
met
it.
Paul. I made my own little pilgrimage. My Damascus, a small semi-detached on the outskirts of Wolverhampton. We drank coffee in his kitchen and tried to connect to one another. Although he knew I hadn't come in search of an apology, reason or retribution, he still spiraled in panic, thrown high and lucid by his own dented bonnet. Responsibility had made him old. Like us, he'd already passed beyond any conceivable boundary of life.
This hermit, this seer, this distant historian of bones and old bread, where did he vanish to? Why, asked the farmers. Why, asked Jacobson. Why bother with your visions at all, if you're just to throw your arms up at the cliff and let it close in behind you and seal you into the belly of the island, a museum shut to all but the most devoted?
Esther is the narrator's love interest, I believe his wife actually. But obviously we'll learn a little bit more about that as the game progresses. Right now, like I said, we're just following a red light. Simple game mechanics. It's very hypnotizing, mesmeric.
He still maintains he wasn't drunk, but tired. I can't make the judgment or the distinction anymore. I was drunk when I landed here, and tired too. I walked up the cliff path in near darkness and camped in the bay where the trawler lies beached. It was only at dawn that I saw the bothy and decided to make my temporary lodgings there. I was expecting just the aerial and a transmitter stashed in a weatherproof box somewhere on the mount. It had an air of uneasy permanence to it. Like all the other buildings here, erosion seems to have evaded it completely.
Now that little bit of dialogue was in reference to the Paul we'd mentioned earlier. An old friend. One of my favorite things about this game is throughout the island there's hidden ghosts that you can encounter. I'm not sure I found all of them on any playthrough I've ever done of this. They tend to only exist in the periphery of the vision. If you look at them, they run away. It's not really a horror game, but like I said, everything about this game is rather haunting. There's a couple I might be able to find on this playthrough. I think I remember at least where one or two of them are.
Dear Esther, I have now driven the stretch of the M5 between Exeter and Bristol over 21 times. But although I have all the reports and all the witnesses, and have cross-referenced them within a millimetre using my Ordnance Survey maps, I simply cannot find the location. You'd think there would be marks to serve as some evidence. It's somewhere between the turn-off for Sanford and the welcome brake services. But although I can always see it in my rear-view mirror, I have as yet been unable to pull ashore.
And this soundtrack was composed by a woman by the name of Jessica Curry. I'm not sure if she's made anything else, but I like to have this music playing when I go for walks in the woods at night. Makes me wish I had a lantern. I'll put a lantern on my Christmas list, I think. But in the meantime, let's go see what's going on with this derelict ship. See if we get any more story beats just for finding this. Now, I have played this game a few times, but inevitably I have a feeling I'm going to get lost on this island again. It's pretty linear, but every time I somehow make a wrong turn and get turned
There
around.
must be a hole in the bottom of the boat. How else could new hermits have arrived?
And neither did he eat nor drink, spray painted on the side of the ship. There's weird cryptic messages hidden all throughout the island, and I've never really been able to decipher most of them. I've barely been able to decipher the story that the game is literally telling me through these letters and this narration.
I had kidney stones, and you visited me in the hospital. After the operation, when I was still half submerged in anesthetic, your outline and your speech both blurred. Now my stones have grown into an island and made their escape, and you have been rendered opaque by the car of a drunk.
So right there we got a key piece of information, I think. Sounds like Esther may have been the victim of a drunk driver. You'll notice that as a common theme of a lot of the games I'm choosing to play on this channel is the way in which they tell their stories tend to be more subtle.
It's only at night that this place makes any sluggish effort at life. You can see the buoy and the aerial. I've been taking to sleeping through the day in an attempt to resurrect myself. I can feel the last days drawing upon me. There's little point now in continuation. There must be something new to find here. Some nook or some cranny that offers a perspective worth clinging to. I've burnt my bridges. I've sunk my boats and watched them go to water.
Like a story that's open for some interpretation, at least. It makes it fun to find a community and kind of unravel the mystery of the story together or slowly over time. I've already turned myself around a bit, but I'm pretty sure we just walk over there. There's a path down there because, again, always walking towards the red light. Next on the list of games I think I'd like to play is going to be Journey, which has some of the same art direction as well as the same composer as Abzu. Wanted to get a couple of things out of the way on the channel first, just to get some practice in. That way when I tackled the game I really initially wanted to play, I have a little bit more confidence, I suppose. A better idea of what it is I'm trying to do. Do I go down there or up here? Probably lead the same way, but the lower path might have a bit more story. Let's go check.
What charnel house lies at the foot of this abyss? How many dead shepherds could fill this hole?
Gonna try not to fall down there. So this game deals with a couple of themes in regards to loneliness, shame,
I've
forgiveness.
begun my ascent on the green slope of the western side. I've looked deep into the mountain from the shaft and understood that I must go up and then find the way under. I will stash the last vestiges of my civilization in the stone walls and work deeper from there. I'm drawn by the aerial and the cliff edge. There is some form of rebirth waiting for me there.
I think shame and remorse are powerful burdens for anyone to carry.
The bothy was constructed originally in the early 1700s. By then, shepherding had formalized into a career. The first habitual shepherd was a man called Jakobsen, from a lineage of migratory Scandinavians. He was not considered a man of breeding by the mainlanders. He came here every summer whilst building the bothy, hoping eventually that becoming a man of property would secure him a wife and a lineage. Donnelly records that it did not work. He caught some disease from his malcontented goats and died 2 years after completing it. There was no one to carve white lines into the cliff for him either.
So when we were at the base of the hill there, you might have seen one of the first ghosts we'll see sneak away into this building.
3 cormorants seen at dusk. They did not land. This house built of stone, built by a long-dead shepherd. Contents: my camp bed, a stove, a table, chairs, my clothes, my books. The caves that score out the belly of this island are leaving it famished. My limbs and belly famished. This skin, these organs, this failing eyesight. When the battery runs out in my torch, I will descend into the caves and follow only the phosphorescence home.
Jakobsen would be the person who initially discovered the island. Donnelly, I believe, was somebody who lived here for much, much longer. It's a bit of a hermit or a recluse.
He left his body to the medical school and was duly opened out for a crowd of students 21 days after his passing. The report is included in my edition of his book. The syphilis had torn through his guts like a drunk driver, scrambling his organs like eggs on a plate. But enough definition remained for a cursory examination, and, as I suspected, they found clear evidence of kidney stones. He's likely to have spent the last years of his life in considerable pain. Perhaps this is the root of his laudanum habit. Although its use makes him an unreliable witness, I find myself increasingly drawn into his orbit.
Now, from my understanding, the narrator and Esther have been to this island before.
They found Jakobsen in early spring. The thaw had only just come. Even though he'd been dead nearly 7 months, his body had been frozen right down to the nerves and had not even begun to decompose. All around him, small flowers were reaching for the weak sun. The goats had adjusted happily to life without a shepherd and were grazing freely about the valley. Donnelly reports they hurled the body in fear and disgust down the shaft, but I cannot corroborate this story.
This game uses interesting little set pieces that seem out of place, like an urn or a traffic pylon on an island. But they all have a purpose. Yeah, like I was saying, I believe the narrator and Esther knew of this island. It's not just me discovering it for the first time as we play this game. This is more me returning here to find a piece of my wife. I lost to a drunk driver, it sounds like.
Climbing down to the caves, I slipped and fell and have injured my leg. I think the femur is broken. It is clearly infected. The skin has turned a bright, tight pink, and the pain is crashing in on waves, winter tides against my shoreline, drowning out the ache of my stones. I struggled back to the bothy to rest, but it has become clear that there is only one way this is likely to end. The medical supplies I looted from the trawler have suddenly found their purpose. They will keep me lucid for my final ascent.
At the beginning of the game, when you arrive at the dock, an interesting little tidbit is you can turn around and it seems there's no boat that you arrived on, or if you did arrive on a boat, it seems to be gone. Make of that what you will. So we're about to descend before we continue on with our final ascent. I believe this is about the halfway point of the game, so I'm going to wrap this one up here, and then we'll come back later as to what lies on the other side of this pit. I hope you're enjoying this one. I have a soft spot for this game. It's probably the first quote-unquote walking simulator I've ever played, but similar to something like Abzu, there's just something about the atmosphere that really speaks to me. It's beautiful and scary-ish at the same time, haunting. That'll be the word we go with. But until next time, I hope you all have a good rest. Talk to you soon.